What's up, my friends? Welcome to a new episode of the Proud Papi podcast. On today's episode, I got my really good friend Lannie, and he is an amazing father, an amazing dad, and we are going to talk about his dad. Go ahead and check it out. So, Lannie, man, share with me just kind of your household, kind of like how you grew up. What was home life like?
Home life was it was great. You know, I had a great childhood that I can remember. My dad and my mom and my brother and myself. There was 4 of us in the house.
Okay.
Mom passed away when I was 8, and then my dad kind of took the reins from there.
Yeah.
Became a single parent for a lot of my adolescent years.
Yeah.
You know, that was tough. It was rough watching him struggle.
Yeah.
Because it was adjusting to, doing things differently, you
Right.
know. And us kids, I think we felt that. We felt that he was trying, and, it was very noticeable.
Yeah.
He was struggling to do it alone. So we actually moved in with my grandparents. And we stayed with my grandparents, or at least I did, from the time I was 9 all the way until I think I was 17. So I stayed a good portion of my teenage years with my grandparents and my dad. But I mean, it was a great household. My dad was a huge jokester, liked to make everybody laugh and, have a good time. Wasn't raised Christian, God wasn't involved. My dad wasn't involved in church at all throughout my teenage years. It wasn't until I graduated high school is kind of when he got his 3rd DUI, and he was like, I need to change. So then he got involved in the church, and then for years tried to get me to come, and never really accepted the invitation until later on. Yeah. But overall, my childhood was, I loved it from, like I said, from what I can remember. Mm-hmm. I think when I lost my mom, I kind of blocked out a lot of things in my childhood. I struggle to remember. Right.
But like struggle to remember things after your mom or before? Okay.
Before, yeah. So, like what's the memory? 3 years old or something like that. You really start to remember things. Yeah. I don't remember a lot. Yeah. It could be a random day. Mm-hmm. Or, I'm doing something very random, and then all of a sudden my mind, my memory will click in. I'm like, oh wow, like I remember that. And it's kind of cool to experience that. Same time, kind of sucks that I have to do that, right? But but yeah, from what I can remember, my childhood was great. My dad was great. To watch a man, go through what he went through, losing a wife. She was only 31, so he must have been 37, maybe. He was still pretty young. Yeah. To watch him, struggle through that and grieve, and all while trying to smile still. Yeah. It was hard to deal with. So yeah.
So when your dad was doing it alone, was he? You mentioned that he was a jokester. Yeah. So did he keep things pretty light around the house, or was it, or were things like run like a tight ship? Like what kind of how did he run the home when he was doing it alone?
I think everyone had a part. Everyone did their chores. Everyone knew what they had to do. Yeah. Like I said though, once she passed, and I want to say we lived, just the 3 of us, myself and my brother, maybe a few months before we moved out, to my grandparents' house. And then I was kind of, raised along with my grandparents. Yeah.
So did they like kind of take the reins a little bit from your dad to kind of help your dad out, or?
Yeah, not necessarily take the reins, but they did help out a lot with, we played sports, so needed to ride to practice. My dad was at work or something. They would step in, pick us up from school, or stuff like that. Take us to the store, whatever it is. But they helped out a lot. My dad worked a lot, so he was in construction, so he would work, sun up, sun down. He was on the grind. So Yeah.
And what was your relationship with your dad at that time that you guys were living with your grandparents like?
I was very close to my dad.
Okay.
Was always very close with my dad. That's another thing. Like, I think back when I was a little kid, a lot of memories I have as a little kid are with him in it. When I say I can't remember much about my mom, those years, it's with her.
Right.
I don't really remember her. But when I was a kid, I remember my dad.
Yeah.
You know, he was always there. Very easy to, I can just run up and jump on his lap and we'd wrestle. That's where I fell in love with wrestling and, that whole Ultimate Warrior era, But yeah, no, he was, very easygoing. Could always, run and talk to him or whatever. So.
Right.
Yeah.
Now you played football in school.
I did.
All the way high school, college as well, a little bit too.
Played
right?
junior college and semi-pro. Yeah.
So what was that like? Was that something Dad wanted you to do from the beginning, or was that something you kind of fell in love with and Dad just supported? Or
well, for the longest time, he wouldn't let me play.
Okay.
And I think that has to do with my mom didn't want me to play.
Right.
And so I think he was just kind of honoring that.
Yeah.
But as I got a little, I think I started at 11 years old. And, once I was a baseball player mostly, growing up, Little League. And then once I started playing football, it was game over. That's all I wanted to play, And he played football in high school. I believe he played some semi-pro football as well. So when I started playing football, he was excited about it. He's a diehard Raider fan, loved football. So once I started playing, he was all about it.
Yeah.
And he couldn't get him off the field. Right. He wasn't a coach, but he would be on the sideline. Yeah. If he could run a towel out or if he could run a water out, film. He had camera, on a tripod. He was the whole time.
Yeah.
Every game, he was always involved with sports, especially football out there in high school, especially. Yeah.
Yeah. And so him recording your games, was it just just have home videos, or did he go back over stuff with you to coach you through things? Or
no, we never did any kind of he never did any film sessions with me, but he did. He would show people, the family. We'd rewatch it, and it'd be like, Dad, you see that? You see what I did there? You know, and then he would say something like, if I'd messed up, he'd be like, you should have did that, or But he was, what's funny too, though, he would get caught watching the game. So he would watch the game and the camera would just kind of float around. Yeah, drift. So you're you go back and watch the tape and I'm running or whatever, got the ball, and all of a sudden you see the sky, Yeah. So that was funny. It's kind of a joke that we had for years after. But, yeah.
So your dad, obviously had a drinking problem growing up. Yeah. I think you've actually described him as a happy drunk, though, right?
Yeah, he was. Yeah.
So he'd drink and
tell jokes and just make you laugh. Yeah.
Right. Mm-hmm. But obviously there was a point where he realized, this is not the way I should live my life.
Yeah.
And so how old were you when that happened?
I must have been 19, 20, around there when he decided enough was enough. Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And what was that like to see him change his life like that?
I was really happy.
Yeah.
I was really happy for him because I knew why he was drinking.
Right.
It's to medicate, right?
Yeah.
To hide, the pain you're feeling or going through.
Yeah.
And when I was a kid, I would say, or at least to my knowledge, my memory, he wasn't as bad of a drinker up until I lost my mom. And then once that happened, I feel like he kind of just, just went through it,
right?
And the drinking got worse, and he liked to get behind the wheel and
right.
drive. And he did get in an accident. I don't know if it was his first or second one he got in the accident. It wasn't a big accident. I think it was like a fender bender kind of a thing.
Yeah.
But he got popped.
Right.
So, and he lost his license. Did the whole DUI program.
Yeah.
Got his license back, and then happened again. And you just kind of see that he was just, he was hurting still. And then, one day, I don't even know how it happened. I think he got his third one, and I think he was just like, that's it, I'm done. And I don't know how church got involved, or how he just like, I need to go to church. I don't know that moment he had.
Right.
But I just remember when the drinking stopped.
Yeah.
And I just remember how happy he was, when he stopped drinking. Yeah. And it was very noticeable. You seen joy on his face. Mm-hmm. And he was remarried at the time that he went to church or started going to church. My stepmom, they were both real heavy drinkers. Yeah. Loved to party. Right. And so they kind of did it together. And once that happened, man, he was a whole nother person. Yeah. A whole nother joy to be around. Right.
So like seeing your dad go from, making that change in his life, you're saying that the change was noticeable. Did it change your guys' relationship at all as far as how you guys got along, or?
I don't think so. Okay. I don't think so because, like I said, every time he was drinking, he would always try and make you laugh. Yeah. I would say there were a few times where, like, see, this is back in like the 90s where, right. You can drive to a club and leave your kids in the car. So, there's a few times that me and my brother, my sister too, were, left in the car for a little while Dad went to the club or the casino or whatever, you know. But that was okay back then, I think. Right. Maybe it wasn't okay. I don't know. But he did it, you know. And I remember, like, Dad, like, why do you keep going? Like, don't leave, But it wasn't, I don't think it was, like, no harm meant when he did it. Yeah. Yeah.
So, like, you get married, you have Elijah, your first son. Mm-hmm. What was that moment like for your dad to see you become a dad?
Oh man, I had the moment I came out of the hospital room. We have it on camera. I don't remember who it was that took the video, but there's a video of me walking up to my dad and I don't even know if we said anything. Yeah. We just embraced and buried our heads in shoulders and just kind of just started crying, Yeah. And I remember Elijah, when he was born, he had these massive hands. And I was like, oh my goodness, those are my dad's hands. Yeah. So like, I was like, I need to go tell my dad, he has your hands, But man, that was, I'm so thankful that moment was caught on camera because I watch that often. Right. I think I post that pretty much every year for Elijah's birthday, as like a little tribute for him for his birthday. But yeah, that was something so special that I'll never forget that moment. Right. I really won't, Yeah. It was a special time.
Yeah. Like when it comes to being a dad, like especially with your kids, like what are some things that you kind of picked up from your dad? Like just, either watching him or even things he told you to share with you. Like what were some of the like best advice that he's given you?
I think with my dad, it was never really, he never really said or gave me advice. It was just in his actions. Mm. So everything that I learned from him is everything that he did for me. Yeah. And I don't remember a time him ever sitting me down and say like, hey, you got to do this or remember to do that or you should do this. And I don't ever remember a time when, that happened. Yeah. I just kind of learned by how he was with us. Right. He was always there for, like I said, for every sporting event, right. Concert. I played in a band at school. So in the marching band, all the parades he was at, we did a trip to Great America with the marching band and he was there. Yeah. And, took time off work to come. Yeah. And which was difficult at the time. I think back and like, wow, he was a single parent, single income. And he took, time off work that I'm sure he wasn't paid for, to be there. And looking back, means a lot. That meant a lot that he showed up. So the most what I get from that is to show up. Right. Obviously, you know, to do whatever I have to do to get to wherever I got to be. Show up doing homework. You know, show up at the practices, join the coaching staff, you know, however that looks, which I did for 3 years and continuing this year, right. To join the coaching staff and, you know, just to never miss the moments of growth, right. You know, and I remember like for Elijah, I remember him, you know, the day he was born, just a baby to now, and to see the growth and to be there for all those moments, it's special. You know, it's a special thing, and I look forward to the, you know, many more memories to make. So
right, I think like I don't know, for us, like we learned a lot from our dad just watching him too. My dad wasn't necessarily like sit us down, let me teach you guys something, or let me, you know, my dad's not like a huge talker, but through his actions, he was able to like teach us a lot just about how to handle life situations, you know, and so, you know, sometimes it's those lessons that we learned without him really teaching it, you know, he's just going on about his day, but we're always watching, you know, kids are always
learned
watching.
Behavior. Right? Like it's all learned behavior for sure.
Yeah. So your dad was a very present, dad. Talk a little bit about your dad's role as a granddad, like with your kids and what that, like, take, you know, now, okay, I know my relationship with my dad, but now seeing him interact with my kids as a grandfather, how was he as a granddad? What was that like?
He was great. Yeah. He was a great grandfather. I mean, anytime my kids are around, or he came around, he was very present and wanted to know their day, wanted to know what they were up to. He was a bass player, so he, you know, tried to teach the kids instruments. He loved instruments. His whole garage was decked out of drums. Never played the drums, but he had a drum set. Yeah. You know, he had bongos. He never played those either, but he had them. You know, and again, he's old school, so he had, you know, his whole wall was full of CDs, and he had DJ equipment. You know, loved music. Yeah. Loved music. Yeah. So anytime he had, or we were at his house, he would bring the kids out and let them play around or try and teach them something. Yeah. Was always at their baseball games, football games, and, you know, he was very present, would always call, you know, how they doing, how they doing today, and or whatever, they being good, and hey, when are you going to bring them over, and stuff like that. He had many grandkids. Yeah. Mine didn't, I would say, I mean, to be honest, my kids didn't see him as much as some of the other grandkids. Yeah. And that's because, just to kind of be honest, like my dad was in his later years in life, was handicapped by the time I already had my kids. Yeah. So I seen the toll that it took to have kids around all the time. Yeah. You know, so I always felt bad. Right. That, hey, my dad don't have no grandkids over right now. So he'd be like, hey, bring the kids over. There's no one here. And I'd be like, but Dad, like, this is your you time. When do you ever get that? Yeah. Right. So I would always feel bad that he never got that. And so anytime that, you know, he would be like, hey, bring the kids, sometimes I would, sometimes I wouldn't. Right. And, you know, thinking back, I'm like, shoot, I probably should have, you know, but I know, me personally, if, you know, my dad is anything like how I am, which I'm pretty sure he was. Yeah. You like your alone time, you know, and, and like I said, a lot of times he didn't get alone time. There was always somebody in his house, which isn't a bad thing. You know, he loved to host. He loved to you know, be there for people as well. But I just seen that, Dad, you're tired. Yeah. You know, get your rest. Right. So I just, you know, it sucked to do that, but at the same time, I think I had his interest, you know, I was thinking of him. So yeah,
for sure. I think, you know, that's like one of the harder things about life. I know, like for us, me and I've had numerous conversations, like, wow, like everyone's getting older, and that includes mom and dad, you know, and just seeing everyone get, like, the kids get older, us get older, our parents get older, and realizing, man, like time is moving and it's not slowing down for anybody, and trying to enjoy the most that we can with each other. Yeah. Especially of our parents, because one day, you know, they won't be here.
Absolutely. Yeah. I know. I think back. So I just turned 41, and I remember when my dad turned 41. I remember his early 40s, and I'm living that right now. Yeah. And he was already handicapped. You know, he was already, can't really move. His back was messed up. He actually hurt his back at work. He was a construction worker, or heavy equipment operator. Yeah. And at one time he went out, he was moving a big old boulder into the bucket of his backhoe. And I don't know, he thought he was He-Man or something. He tried to do it with his hands and threw his back out. And that just kind of, since that moment, you know, everything started to happen. He was on his knees and hips. And so that was already into his 40s, you know. Wow. He had to medically retire. Like they said, you know, you're better off being at home. You're just, you can't move much these days, you know? Man. Yeah. I remember that. It's a trip to think that. It's a trip to think that, like, wow, I'm that age now, and here I am breaking my back at work now, you know? I'm like, shoot. I get home from work, and I'm like, oh, man. Yeah. Don't touch me.
Yeah. You know? Leave me alone. Let me rest up. You know, I had the privilege of meeting your dad a couple times before he passed, and man, he always had a smile on his face. Oh, yeah. He seemed like really fun to be around, you know, cracking jokes or, you know, ragging on you or whatever it was. I think, you know, that is the sign of a man who, like, lived a full life, you know, like somebody who's just happy, even though their circumstances not ideal and they're in pain physically or unable to do things. Like, to see the smile on his face was really cool.
Absolutely.
You know?
Yeah.
But, you know, like so we've done this before, you know, talked about your dad on the podcast, but I wanted to bring him up again because, you know, I think we probably did that like a year ago that I had you do that podcast. So here we are, you know, what, 2 years since your dad's passed?
2022. Yeah.
So
actually it'd be 2 years in July.
2 years in July. Yeah, that's right. 2 years in July. And so, like, now taking in another year, right? We just talked about it. Like, eventually our parents won't be here, and, you know, taking in and looking at, thinking about all these memories with him and what he's taught you, what he's shown you. Like, what are some things that you think, like, kind of made you the dad that you are today?
Some things that he's taught me.
Yeah, or like some things that you've seen through his life, or even just thinking about things that have made you kind of maybe adjust or change the way you father. Like, what are some of those things?
Man, I mean, honestly, I think I carry a lot of what I've learned from him. And really, I feel like I try and do everything with his voice in the back of my head or in my ear whispering, "I'm proud of you." Yeah. So I'm constantly trying to, even to this day, he's not here for almost 2 years now. Even to this day, I want to do everything that I can the right way, just so I can feel him say, "I'm proud of you." Yeah. You know, so like the approach that I take to being a dad is just, honestly, you know, I think back to when I was a kid, and, you know, when you fall off your bike and your dad runs out there and you okay, you know, I take that approach with the kids these days. You know, now, like I carry that with me, and everything that I've watched and learned from him, I brought, you know, to me being a dad. And yeah, man, I mean, every time I do something, even when I'm, you know, singing on the worship team on Sundays, on the weekend, I look back to where he sat. Yeah. And like, I can see that smile still, you know, and that to me is like, I'm proud of you. And so, man, I try and do everything that, today to still make him proud. And so that's just kind of like, motivates me. It gives me like that drive to continue the legacy and continue to do good by my children.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So
I think that's like powerful, man. I think, you know, so it's going to be 2 years since my grandfather died. So definitely like, I relate with everything you just said, thinking about, because I honestly, I don't know if you can, Eli, but I can hear my grandfather's voice, like, you know, just the way he would say things. I can still hear it in my mind, you know. You know, like, so we had a leadership class on Saturday, and Pastor Chad had us like life map or life or whatever, right? So basically, like, write down the biggest moments in your life that you remember, good or bad, right? So I did that. And one of those moments was obviously my grandfather passing away. And then then Pastor Chad said, okay, now use another sticky note and explain why you put that moment down. And so for that moment, this is what I wrote from when my grandpa passed away. I put, you know, some people say that when someone close to you dies, you lose a part of yourself. And I said, but for me, I feel like something came alive in me. Just the idea of seeing the result of his life, like seeing, like, obviously I wasn't in the beginning, but my whole life up to that point, I saw him live his life out the same, like living for one purpose, living in one direction, and then seeing him pass and still be faithful to that, like spoke like life into me. You know what I mean?
That's awesome.
And for me, like it made me realize like I don't get to see him, you know, but like something in me is like, it just came alive in me, you know, like it was just like, and this sounds silly, maybe like, but I'm like, I get it. I get it. I see the picture. You know what I mean? So
it's almost like activation.
Yeah.
You know, I remember like when my dad passed, I felt like the weight shifted.
Yeah.
You know, like, okay, now it's my responsibility. Right. You know, like the passing of the mantle, you know, like it's now my turn to lead. Right. You know, and that's kind of how I felt. Man, you know, I think of when people say that, you know, that something dies, a part of me dies. I've said that. I think I even said that when my dad died, or maybe in a moment when I was by myself, I was like, I feel like something, a part of me has died. Yeah. I kind of feel like that's a little bit of a tactic from the enemy, you know, to make you feel less than, to make you feel like you'll never amount to anything, like your parent or whoever it is. Right. You know, we just went over freedom. We just went through freedom, right? And it's speaking words and speaking death over your life in a sense. I kind of see it. I mean, after you were just saying that, like, it just kind of like, wow, it kind of hit me that's almost, I would, for me personally, I feel like that is you know, that's a tactic from the enemy to just bring you down. Yeah. When really you should feel like the way you just described, you know, there's an activation that happens, that something turns on, and you're like, okay, it's my turn. Right. You know? Yeah. Wow, that's crazy.
And I mean, honestly, for you, like, that's kind of how it played out, right? Like, because your dad passed, and then you had relatives pass, you know, almost consecutively in a year. Yeah. And I remember you were sharing with me, like, the family kept turning to you to be that spiritual, like, comforter, you know, to be the one to kind of like, to come and minister, like, bring comfort to the family. So like, it happens, you know, that's exactly what happens, you know. I know in our family, it was that case, like, actually that weekend when my grandfather passed away, you know, it was my uncles that were here, and they kind of just took on, actually, so my grandfather would always, either at the hospital or when we got home with any of our babies, he would always be the one to present, right? Come, say a special blessing over them, a prayer.
So cool.
And then he passed away, and then Dalia came, and it just happened to be that week that we got home, my uncle was in town. And so I was like, come on over. And he came over and he held my daughter and he prayed a blessing over her. So it's like, you know, just because my grandfather's gone doesn't mean that stops.
So like the legacy lives on.
Yeah, it continues. Yeah. It continues forward. Like, and that's
generation to generation. Like, that's special.
You know what I mean? And so, like, I think that's like, and then I've seen that in your life too, like where your dad passed and all these relatives have been passing away, but yet the family's starting to turn to you. Like, hey man, we know that you go to church and you know the Lord. Like, we need you to share at the funeral. We need you to share with the family, you know. And I think that's really cool. Like how God will do that, you know. Like like someone has to go away, but He never leaves a space like empty. Right. You know, always fills it with somebody that's been growing under that. You know. Yeah. So,
you know, that was when my dad's youngest brother passed. It was actually, I think it was Thanksgiving. Yeah. I think it was Thanksgiving morning. And that was, so my dad was July, so that would have been November. So it was only a few months later. Yeah. His younger brother passed, and they came and got me 6 a.m. I had COVID. I was sick in bed, and they're like, we don't want the body to leave. We don't want his body to leave his house until you go over there. And I was like, okay, I'll mask up and I'll go do. And that was the hardest thing because, my uncle and my dad, they're like twins almost. They look identical in some ways. And to kneel down next to him and peel back the sheet and see that, almost relive that. Yeah. Man, it was hard to do. But again, like, I got this unbelievable strength from God throughout this whole thing. Yeah. It was crazy because, you know, to be able to do that and speak at his funeral and, you know, months later, have another uncle pass, and then my aunt passed, and then another uncle passed. I lost 3 uncles and an aunt since my dad passed. Wow. And 2 of the, and we were all close when I was a kid. Yeah. You know, a lot of my memories, those were my 2. So my dad's brother and then 2 of my mom's brothers and her sister have passed. And on my mom's side, those 2 actually took their own life. And I mean, my goodness, that was a struggle. Yeah. Because it's like, oh God, now what? You know? It's crazy to see, but definitely have like the family reach out and, you know, hey, keep us in your prayer, or can you come pray? Like, I definitely feel that. Like I said, my dad was the one that they would go and be like, hey, you come pray, and he would. Yeah. My dad had a prayer book, and he wrote names down who he's praying for. Wow. And that's just the way he was. You know, if he said he was praying for you, he would absolutely pray for you. Yeah. You know, you always get those messages, I'm praying for you. Like, you're like, are they really though? Yeah. Are they really praying? I don't know. Yeah. But he would call them out, call their names out in prayer. And, and that's something that I kind of am trying to do, you know. Yeah. I needed to be better at, but it's something that I'm trying to do. Right. But to go through something like that, my other uncle, he just passed. It was pretty recent. Right. You know, a month and a half ago, maybe a month ago. But yeah, it's definitely, it's weird to hold that position. You know? Yeah. You know, I definitely want to get into your kids and stuff and you fathering your kids. I just thought it would be a really great place to start by talking about your dad, seeing that your dad really has laid a foundation for you, you know, to be able to raise your kids and lead your family. And we probably should have said at the very beginning, but what was your dad's name? Lannie.
Lannie. And you're Lannie too as well, right? Yeah. So he gave you Junior, or he gave you his name. Gave me his name. So it's so cool to see, like, you have my name, you got my legacy, like, keep it going, you know? So, dude, thank you so much for coming on and talking about your dad, bro. Appreciate it. Hey, thank you guys so much for joining us this week. I really enjoyed my time with Lannie. We're going to be bringing him back on in a couple weeks because I really want to get into his fatherhood, his relationship with his kids. But right now, let me ask you the question. Sometimes the people that leave the greatest impact on our lives are those who passed on. Who is somebody in your life that has passed on that has left a great impact? Let me know right now in the comments. And if you like content just like this, we drop new episodes every week, and they're all about fatherhood. So make sure you go ahead and subscribe to the channel so that you can get updated on the latest episodes. I love you guys. Have a great week. Until next time, peace out.